Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 1 o'clock. We have our MTRAC meeting rescheduled for today. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will start with the reminder at the bottom of the agenda that our next meeting is October 9th, and we will go back to our fall hours of 3 p.m. I have inquired about the possibility of making them later, but the city would like to have an employee turn the taping on for us. So we will be, the latest that we can start is 3 o'clock. So October 9th, and we already know that at least one item that we're going to be asked to provide some counsel on. So we look forward to that. Maureen, do you want to start us off with just a quick update?
I actually don't really have much. I mean, I think your agenda is fairly full. There's any number of things going on right now, so I don't have anything specific,
Okay.
Marty, but thank you.
Sure. One thing that I have not gotten to yet is that we have been asked to submit minutes. I will watch the tapes and I'll put the minutes together. At our next meeting, I'll have the minutes for all 3 meetings for us to approve. From those minutes, I did actually go back and rewatch the last meeting to make sure that I was capturing what everyone's thoughts were about what we wanted to work on as a group. I hope that most of you are seeing the things that you wanted to see us focusing on, and it doesn't mean that each of these is going to result in action. I won't go through them in detail, but I've tried to capture the topics that everyone felt as if were important for us to be focusing on. If there's anything missing, please let me know, and certainly we can add or subtract from this as we go. Any questions on the list? Maureen and I participated in a city meeting this morning on the beach concession agreements, and MTRAC's role, we made some recommendations last year. We revisited those a little bit this morning, and the culmination of this will be that the city will be putting together their proposed approach to the beach concession agreements, which are 5-year agreements that expire at the end of this season. These are for, as I mentioned at the last meeting, the chairs and umbrellas, the concessions, anything that's, that you're seeing being sold on the beaches. And we had a very good conversation. It was about wanting to be sure that we are as fair as possible and as consistent as possible, with MTRAC having lent the idea that there should be a rational approach to how much the minimum bid is on each parcel. I say minimum bid because generally speaking there are no other bidders, so everybody gets them for the minimum bids, but that's just the way the process works. We did ask them to consider actually not offering every parcel up for concession, so that there are some parcels that remain without anything being sold. Really good discussion. We talked about probably doing what we're describing as a bit of an a la carte approach, where there's a certain beginning fee that you have for having your hut, having your home station, and then if it were a hotel, there are two zones, there's hotel zones and retail zones. If you're a hotel zone, maybe a certain number of rows of chairs and umbrellas are included in that. If you wanted additional rows of chairs and umbrellas, that would potentially be a higher cost. If you want cabanas, there are several of the vendors that have cabanas. Those would be, you'd have to specify how many, and there would be a price associated with each one. We don't expect that the revenue is going to change significantly, but we will be looking to try to tie the agreements over the 5 years to kind of a Cape May budget inflation factor. It's not necessarily the CPI, because the city's costs do go up differently from just inflation, especially because of healthcare, but something that has attaches a escalator to it that again has some rational basis.
So Martin, just two questions. So you said they expire the end of 2025 or 2026?
2025.
And then and how many agreements do we have out there today?
Well, so separate agreements are probably a dozen.
Yeah, approximately. I would say between 10 and 12
Yep.
would be a fair number.
Your mic wasn't on, sorry. That's okay.
Yes, between 10 and 12 would be,
And are most of those hotel, retail, split evenly?
So most of them are the beach boxes.
That's what I thought.
I think there's 700 beach boxes.
so I think the actual agreements, the beach concessions, are mostly on the hotel side. There are two vendors that offer just the retail beach boxes. But the actual number of items associated, the one beach, retail beach vendor concession has about 700-plus boxes. So at this point in time, it's, of the 10 to 12, Russ, I would say, the predominance of them are on the hotel side, and two vendors have retail, what we define as just retail related activities.
And in any of those agreements, the expectation wouldn't be that a hotel, for instance, could take all the beachfront?
We are, a part of the discussion today was that we're taking a look at setting up some baseline, and then some parameters, and then some à la carte. So it's early discussions and just internal at this point. So, yeah, we're trying to be mindful of some of the feedback that has been received, but still wanting to make sure that we're partnering with the commercial and business enterprises in the city. So early discussions.
It was discussed, and we think that there may be some encroachment, and there was discussion about using drones to kind of get pictures so that when someone is exceeding their licensed area, that there be the opportunity to say, hey, here's a photograph, push it back, right, exactly.
So unencumbered by facts, my perception is that now versus 5 years ago, there is a lot more of that concession that's taken advantage of by enterprises. And so I guess I would ask us to at least ensure that we have tied some relationship between the cost and the usage of same, because we're talking about 5 years. There's a lot that's going to be different 5 years from now, and it would seem like there should be some relationship between those two things.
And Ron, that's why we're taking a look at a base for the bid.
Yeah.
And then à la carte, so that would enable us to escalate should there be additional services offered
Yep.
to patrons out there. So it was part of the discussion.
Is there part of that discussion going to be the number of beach boxes, forgetting the hotels now, just the beach boxes themselves? I'm not sure who put a limit on that. Was it the vendors themselves?
Our understanding is, Mike, that it was the vendor themselves. So,
We actually talked about the fact that
Yeah.
there's greater
So-
demand than supply.
Well, and I was just going to say, the vendors then, I think that there should be a minimum number of boxes they're putting on the beaches. To me, I had a beach box for probably 15 years until the vendors started skinnying down on the number of boxes. In any case, it just seems to me that if that's all you're going to do, I'd rather see somebody else in here
And
that's
that
going to
opportunity-
meet the
Demand,
demand
yeah.
for that beach.
Well, and so in a side gig, I happen to be president of the Cape Rock Condo Association. We have 76 units there, and it is there's no good spot for anybody to store chairs. They either stack them out in front of their unit, or they leave them in their car and they go back and forth. We would love to have a beach box alternative there. When I inquired about it a year or two ago, I was told, and I don't recall by whom, that the Army Corps or some entity did not allow for us to have anything at that beach. And so I had to believe what they said. I don't have any.
so I can't respond to that. I think that certainly when you get north of Pittsburgh,
Yeah.
we do get into a little bit of territory with both Homeland Security, with the Coast Guard base, and Army Corps. So I would say that we can certainly have that discussion with Paul when we meet again, and just say, are there any limitations that exist north of Pittsburgh? Not clear, how
Yeah.
that got relayed, Ron, but, we can certainly put it out there to them. And, one of the things that we had talked about at this committee was that, broadening the availability of more concessions. And I think we need to balance that, but certainly I think that there's certain areas and accommodations that could be evaluated and looked at, but not sure. If someone said that, I would have imagined.
I don't remember who it was.
Yeah, I would have
basically
imagined
took
that they
it
would have
as-
said it with some degree of certainty, because
Yeah.
that's not just something you sort of say no to.
Right.
If you're referencing the Army Corps, then I would think that there's some legitimacy behind it, but certainly, we can follow up.
Yeah, and it may have been that that particular beach had not been bid, and so that's why it was
May very-
said we
yeah.
can't do
May
it.
very well
I don't
be,
know, but
yeah.
I
Hey,
think
hey,
there's
a
an
beach
opportunity.
box is almost as good as a dune. It's there, it's
whereabouts-
Until they
protected,
get washed away.
and they do.
Well, that is, that is,
We're about 30.
Ours was gone.
There were about 30 that got washed away last week.
yeah.
Right.
And we also discussed the age of the boxes, but I don't remember. Someone said that we're nearly as old as they were, and
that would be me.
So not that old.
so
Well,
there
he
is.
said ancient.
I mean, let's face it, we did the last contracts at the end of 2020. So there's something going on at the end of 2020 that may have influenced who was willing to be in this business. Maybe someone will step forward and there could be another entrant.
Oh, I
Never
would
know.
think so.
Yeah.
You never know. So we'll be coming back in October with a bit of a fleshed-out proposal, and the city is looking for MTRAC to endorse it. So we will have the opportunity to see it. We'll have the opportunity to react to it. That is one of the roles that MTRAC does play, is that we sort of serve as a sanity check because of all the brilliance in this room can provide.
Well, part of it, and not to get too far away from the topic, Martin, but it does make you think if, and hopefully wouldn't happen, that if for some reason our beach tag fees went away, or a portion of it went away due to this current proposed legislation, I mean, we got to look for other sources, right? Something to keep in mind.
There was some discussion about that at the TPA meeting last week, and I think that there's maybe a little bit of misconception. It's not that the beach tags are being threatened with being eliminated. It's that the current right, it is currently the law that you have access to the waterfront up to the high tide line without a beach tag. The problem is that you can't enforce it. So it would be, the loss would not come from our elimination of beach.
No, I understood that. I was just suggesting that even the mayor at our meeting said as much as up 50 to 75% of our revenue could be in jeopardy.
I would push back on that. I don't think it's that kind of percentage. All right?
Yeah, I don't either.
You'd have some scofflaws that would bring their fishing pole down, surf cast until
Well,
10 o'clock, and then go settle into a chair without paying it back.
Even if it's 20%, Martin, even if it's 20%, that's pretty significant.
It's on the radar. Anything else on beach concessions? Okay, next topic is something that is one of our items for focus this year. I did have a meeting with Ron, and Mike is also helping on the subcommittee for understanding more about the municipal budget appropriations caps. I did some research. There was some information that was provided at the meeting. It was very informative. I stole the information that's on the next couple of pages from something that I found on the internet. I'm not a college student, so I can't be accused of plagiarism. It did a great job of explaining it. I figured, why should I try to rewrite it? I'm just going to steal from the town of Bloomfield. But basically, there's a 2.5% cap on appropriations. And that is a limiting factor that the city faces because wages and benefit costs certainly go up by more than 2.5% a year. It is normal for the town for most towns by ordinance to increase that to 3.5%. That's allowed within the law. And then the important aspect of it is that there are exclusions and exceptions that can be pulled out of that calculation. Now, that's a double-edged sword, because mathematically, if you're starting with your budget, let's just, I'm just making up numbers. If your budget is $1 million and you have $500,000 of exclusions, now your adjusted budget is $500,000. That's what you apply the 2.5 or 3.5% to. Okay, so you're reducing the denominator when you have the exception or the exclusion, but at the same time, what falls into the exceptions and exclusions is not subject to the cap. So to a certain extent, there's a balancing that has to occur between having the exceptions and exclusions be as small as possible to give the 2.5% some meat, versus as large as possible, because now you've got more that isn't subject to the cap. And that's one of the challenges of municipal budgeting.
But if you were to take it to extreme, if everything were not subject to the cap,
You wouldn't need the 2.5%.
then who would,
Right.
okay, then we're just uncapped, and the
Right.
cap is not even relevant.
Right.
So it just seems like the more that we can remove from the cap, the better, I think, in hindsight, but.
So one of the recommendations that MTRAC had made in the past was that those beach concession revenues should be in the beach utility, and they're currently not. We had that conversation with the city manager and with Kevin Haney, and they confirmed, yes, we haven't done that, and they said, oh, that's a good idea. But we can't just take revenue out of the general fund and put it in the utility, because now your general fund won't balance. So we will likely look to accomplish that over time as we continue to try to identify expenses that also belong in the beach utility, not in the general fund. And that's the iterative process that we're going to be going through. And that's what the city is looking for from MTRAC, is to make recommendations along those lines. Less relevant for us on page 3 is that there also is a 2% cap on how much you can increase property taxes in any given year. And less relevant because we haven't had a increase in 6 years. There was discussion at the TPA meeting about maybe it's time to think about making sure that there is something that is being put into the millage rate, because that then helps to build the surpluses.
Quick question, the 2%, does that apply to just the average? Or like if you do a revaluation some people may be going up 20%. Doesn't restrict that individual. It's the sum of the.
It's the sum of the total.
It's the sum of
yes.
the total,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, all rateable.
So we will be able to increase appropriate properties by more than 2%?
If we did a revaluation.
Yes.
But we wouldn't, certain properties, yes, but the overall number would still be tight.
Overall, we're going to, max 2, or 0. Yeah.
On page 4, another part of the balancing is that it is a benefit to try to set your budget up in a way that you aren't using all of the cap. And you can carry the cap for 3 years. That gives you greater flexibility to be able to manage in year 2 when you maybe don't have enough from the cap to cover it. You have cap left over from the 2 prior years that you can then use. And that's something that the city does do on a regular basis. There is still 2023 cap money that hasn't been used yet.
Which, as an example, is in years where you're doing salary negotiations, contracts, which we have just gone through, or if you get big hits on health and welfare. So there are circumstances in which having that flexibility and that additional money in the cap balances out for those types of unanticipated expectations, since the majority of the city budget is personnel expenses.
So does that mean we have 6% available to us?
It's not the full amount of the cap.
It's not the full
portion,
amount.
right. It's the unused portion, right.
Right.
Unused portion, but I thought we didn't use any of it.
No, each year, when you set up your 3.5%, you use a portion of that to cover your expenses.
Right.
If you've done a good job of budgeting, you hopefully have something left over
Oh, I see
to
what
be
you're
able to
saying.
carry forward.
Gotcha.
Maybe it's a quarter of it, maybe it's a third of it. Remembering that once you take the exceptions and exclusions out, that 2.5, 3.5% number becomes fairly small.
Yeah, because if you, to Maureen's point, if you take out health and welfare and other things like that out of the cap, then those are big pieces that you're taking out.
I think personally, one of the things that I learned the most about from that discussion was bonding. Bonding is a very controversial, it's a topic that's brought up a lot here in the city of Cape May. And I think that I wanted to make sure that we, as a group, understood how the bonding process works so that we can be educated consumers as well as being able to talk about bonding knowledgeably with people that we talk with. Debt service, principal and interest are an exclusion. So that's a big number that comes out. It's currently about half of the total exclusions is debt service. Okay. What we learned, what I've learned in the last 2 weeks, because it's come up a couple of times, is that short-term bonding is really the tool that we need to be able to use, okay? So that when we do the desal plant, for example, that has a 40-year life by the state standards of accounting, we can balance that with things that have a 5-year life and hopefully get a 15-year bond life, so that the bonds that we would actually issue will be much shorter in duration. Why is that important? Because we are all, as citizens of the city, concerned about the legacy that we leave for our children and our grandchildren. We don't want them to be having to pay for the debt, for the services that we decided to put in 2026.
The other side of that a little bit is that if the services that we're putting in are being enjoyed by the future generation, they should pay a portion of that. I think that's only fair.
And to a certain extent, if we were to get to a point where we could no longer afford the bonding, okay, then maybe we lengthen the term to be able to reduce the amount of debt service in any given year. We're not currently in that situation. We actually are able to borrow at less than we
earn.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
right
but
now
and
it's crazy to.
And that would be my concern in going short term, is that if in fact what we saw was interest rates were going to be going up, and you can be relatively sure sometimes, I would not like to see us short-term bonding. I mean, you can ride it up, and maybe that's not so bad because our return on our investments are going up as well,
Right.
but
And it's the surpluses that allow us to borrow as low as rate as we
that's,
can.
yeah.
And the city earns $1 million in interest on that, on the surplus. So bonding, I kind of liken it to, there's mortgage debt and there's credit card debt. Okay? Mortgage debt allows you to build equity in your home and plan for your future, and it's typically at a fairly low rate. Credit card debt is bad debt. You hopefully never have carry credit card debt at 18 or 30% or whatever it is. So I don't think that we should just put all debt into one bucket and say debt is bad. Some debt is good and in fact very necessary, because when we have things that members of the public may want us to currently expense that are bondable, that then comes out of the calculation of that's subject to the 2.5%. And it's a critical exercise that the city goes through to keep things balanced. So I want to spread the word that we need to think about what kind of debt we're taking on, and that there is such a concept of as good debt.
So one of the things I struggle a little bit with is my paranoia about the federal funding for some really important things to the city of Cape May going away. And so I've not been involved in that process before and the grant applications and some of those. But, and so I guess, other than being paranoid, I wonder, does debt, if we had a $30 million additional surplus, for example, and therefore could write a check for a new desal plant, does that mitigate our ability to get funding from somewhere versus if we had an extra $30 million in debt? So we say, oh, we have to have this funding because we can't afford it. Are those things ever considered?
There's a lot of different funding sources, just specifically on the desal plant. There's iBank, there's federal money, there's a number of different things. But conceptually, I think what you're saying, Ron, is, look, does it make more sense for us to build as much surplus as we can so we can just go out and buy it? And I think, to Marty's point, it is a balancing. And I think that when you look at how much we have in surplus, it makes us attractive even to something like the iBank to say, oh, look, this is a solid solid community, and they've got the money. And it makes us more attractive when you're looking to ask the Army Corps to invest in a seawall or those types of things, or FEMA. And then one of the other things is when you're going after that kind of grant money, and there's multiple sources specifically on the desal plant, you want to be able to do this in phases, and that's something that's being discussed now. Rather than doing big bang on the desal plant, what components can we do so we can continue to move this down the road as those conversations or those dollars are made available? And obviously there's a concern, what would be going on at the federal level and how that would trickle down and impact us locally. It also means that's the reason why we're not jumping into doing some of these projects, because quite frankly, they're big projects and have significant impact on the city to the positive, but not anything that we necessarily want to underwrite. So it's that balancing act of waiting to see what happens, waiting to see what comes, and especially in the desal plant. I mean, Mike knows a little bit more on this from the mechanics standpoint, but there's opportunities to phase components of that and bring things online that would sustain the quality of our water and our water supply. And currently, we're evaluating what they are and what they look like and what kind of money we already got through the pipeline to start on those. So something that might, normally projects take 1 or 2 years. The desal plant could be a project that could be 5 to 6 years before we would see a complete conversion. Might be longer just based on that. The seawall is a different project. It's FEMA funded, all hoping that it comes through. It's of critical import to the, beach area. The valuation on that from FEMA's perspective is the loss to homes and properties down at that side of town would be upwards of $80 million as opposed to an investment of, 20 plus. So that's, clearly that's just math, and probably the 80 million might not even be a current number, given the valuations of the home.
Probably more than that.
So, it's those kinds of things. You can't really start a seawall project internally in the city of Cape May. I mean, what are you going to do, one block at a time? We couldn't even afford that. So as Marty's saying, there's reasons to bond, and we have a very good bond advisor in Leon Costello, who has done this with the city for over 20 years. He looks at us and says, you're making the right decisions. So he's a professional, he, gives us good advice. And we're still able to get decent rates because we've got money in surplus, so we look like a good investment.
Without putting my
Yeah.
CPA green eye shade on too much, okay? We wouldn't even be allowed to use the surplus to pay for the desal plant, even if we wanted to. Okay, because that would be against the accounting principles. But even if we...
Because it's a long-term capital project.
Correct. But even if we wanted to, we wouldn't be able to fit it under the 2.5% cap. Okay? The
Except you, that would be in the water utility, wouldn't it, which is not subject to cap?
But we
We
would
don't
not.
know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
The other thing is that I know that Mike mentioned it at our last meeting, and it really resonated with me last week, with Aaron coming as close as it did. That surplus, is critically important for us to have if we ever were to have a storm hit us. And then that would not be, using that money would not be subject to the cap. So that's really the purpose of the surplus, is for disaster preparation, not so much for capital expenditures.
Right. Besides the seawall and the desal plant, what are the other major expenditures the city faces over the next few years that we would need outside funding like we do for those two projects?
Paving,
A lot of street paving.
yep. The city streets, not, the county's sort of done their part. We have some things that we need to take care of.
Beach fill, does that, is there concern? Yeah.
It could fall back on us. You're not,
It could, but I thought we had a separate agreement as it relates to Beachville
had one in
versus
place.
the other communities
Yeah.
up the coast.
Not well-versed on this, Russ, but I thought ours was with the Army Corps. So my recollection is that was sort of a 50 years, okay. And we're, it was 1980 roughly, so,
We're not there yet.
yeah, we got a couple more to squeeze out. But again, it's, they're funded federally too, so.
That leads to the next topic, the fact that the city has successfully decreased their debt ratio by 43% since 2018.
Yeah.
Okay? We're down to 0.9%, where the state allows us to have 3.5% of the three-year average of all rateable properties in town. So when I spoke with TPA last week, that's one of the things that I wanted to make sure was being thought about. The city has done a fantastic job of managing their long-term debt and deserves a lot of credit for doing that. They didn't have to, but they did it anyway, from 1.58% down to 0.9%. That's pretty good.
That's Leon Costello, like she said.
And I just think that, the takeaway is
Been around a long time.
bonding, it may seem to make sense to bond less, especially on shorter-term items that some in the city would consider to be departmental expenses. But if we have the ability to bond those items in the balancing of the budget, it may be a good thing. And I think that that's the message that the city wants to get across, is that they're very thoughtful about the process. It's not a matter of trying to hide anything in a bonding resolution. It is a matter of, this is a very necessary part of municipal budgeting.
And I can just say, and I know that Mike would probably agree, when council looks at those items and those lists and what's presented to us, it gives a lot of consideration to what we're being asked to keep in the operating budget versus what we're bonding for. By item, I mean, we each individually sort of go through that book and understand it. And again, it goes back to unanticipated expenses having to hit the budget and the cap. And in years when you cannot anticipate, and we've had a couple of those, significant increases in healthcare, needing to evaluate, what we pay our employees and contracts coming online, and then there's, to keep in mind, both for certainly in the case of the police department, pension obligations, are not insignificant. So, just some of those things. That's the reason why someone looks at an item and thinks, why are you bonding for that? It makes no sense. It should be a departmental expense. And, we're looking at it saying, we need more of the money to be able to have flexibility on the operating side, as opposed to, trying to put that into the operating budget, so.
Any other thoughts on where we are so far? I mean, there's more work to be done here. The end result of this will be recommendations to the city about ways that maybe, like we had found with the beach concession revenue, where we can help the city to stay within the 2.5, 3.5% cap. We'll look at the impact of potentially increasing the tax rate and not because of the fact that it can potentially help long-term with this.
What's the estimated annual revenue that comes from the beach agreements?
The beach concession agreements, it's not a big number.
That's what I meant. How much is it? 500,000?
No, I wouldn't say so.
Okay. So it's not a huge,
What do you think, Marty? 100, under 100, 75 to 100?
so it's really,
Gee, I happen to have it right here.
Oh, okay.
175,000.
I was gonna say.
Got lucky. All right, I hope that was helpful. It was to me. I mean, it really was something that, I've known as a while as a CPA that insurance accounting is different from healthcare accounting, which is different from not-for-profit accounting. I've never had a client in municipality, so it was eye-opening for me. I hope it was for you as well. The next topic I wanted to talk about is, again, a bit educational for us as members of MTRAC, to make sure that we have the vocabulary to be able to talk intelligently about the subject of municipal tax reassessment and revaluation. All right? It was triggered by the fact that, as I was included in the article that I sent from the Herald, North Wildwood decided that they're going to do a reassessment. And in the sort of the preface to the meeting that I had on the other topic, I sort of addressed it relatively quickly with the city manager, and he was very helpful in pointing out that there's a difference between a reassessment and a revaluation. Okay? Reassessment is being done with internal resources. It is not as thorough. It generally is not even complete of all of the rateable properties in town. It's generally targeted. So a city or town may do different sections of the town at different points in time. A revaluation, on the other hand, is much more thorough. It's done by an outside firm. As it was explained in the article and from the research that I've done, it's inside, it's outside, it's everything. And it's all properties in town, okay? There has not been either a reassessment or revaluation in Cape May County since 2018. Stone Harbor was the last one. And this is despite the fact that in the graph that was included in the Herald article, virtually every town other than Woodbine is below what the state standard is of that your assessed value should not be less than 85%, but it should not be less than, can not be less than. The other limiting factor is there are 2 firms in the state that are licensed to do this. And obviously, real estate values throughout the state, not just in Cape May County, have significantly appreciated over the course of the last several years. We would all be asking for the same from trying to get resources from the same pool.
and for my clarification, the revaluation process can't be kicked off by a municipality, right?
It can be.
It can be.
Can be.
I knew the reassessment could be. I didn't know the revaluation could be as well.
Assessment generally comes from the Cape May County tax assessor notifies the town.
Reassessment comes from Cape May County.
That's my understanding, Russ, yes. But the reevaluation can be done.
Because the revaluation requires a lot more resources, right?
No, it was the
Do I have this?
the opposite. You have
I
it backwards.
I have it backwards?
Yeah, yeah.
So the revaluation is what North Wildwood's doing,
No, they're doing a reassessment.
which means they're using,
Internal people,
well, that's what I just said.
right. So the revaluation
The
is,
revaluation is external and is county-driven
so
then.
it's a
And the
matter of,
reassessment is local.
I think you guys are all confused.
Yeah. Help me out.
Isn't the reassessment when the company comes in and they go around
no,
everywhere
that's
and
the
do it?
revaluation.
So what North Wildwood is doing, if they're doing it internally, is a
Yes.
revaluation?
Reassessment.
That doesn't make any sense.
Why does it not expand on that?
So how are they doing a reassessment internally? You can do them internally?
Yes, that's how a reassessment is.
You can do both of them internally.
No, you can't do a
That's
revaluation.
not what the article on that.
Revaluation is external. Yep.
Yeah, because the article said specifically that North Wildwood the properties were being reassessed. And it was not being driven by the county, it was being driven by North Wildwood.
Right.
So that's why I'm suggesting that revaluation really requires the county, right?
No, I think you could step forward and decide to do a revaluation.
And
on
pay
your own.
for that yourself.
Yes.
Well, either way, we would have to
Either
pay
way, you
for it.
pay for it.
Yeah.
It watches over your,
The revaluation, the county's much more involved.
Well, it requires someone to come to your property. They do a complete assessment of both the outside and the inside of your property.
Yeah.
So, I mean, probably upwards of $400,000 to $500,000, or
So when
could be
this-
more for them, for us to hire a firm. I mean, that
We're
was
sort of
quoted-
waiting for the county.
Yeah, everyone is.
That doesn't mean that you can't do it. It's just that
Talk about the
North Wildwood is stepping out of the line now, right?
And do we know what their logic was in
But
wanting?
just because they're doing a reassessment doesn't mean that the county couldn't do a reevaluation and come up with different numbers,
The
right?
county doesn't do the revaluation.
That the county would require it, or they don't, they're
They
not
would
the
just
ones?
say, Cape May, you need to do a revaluation, okay? I don't know whether they have to approve the outcome.
Well, that's what
And
I'm
let's-
wondering.
Let's
If
go
they
on
do-
to, let's go on to the next point, which I think is important.
Okay.
Okay? A revaluation or a reassessment does not increase taxes.
No, I
okay?
get all
It
that.
just changes the millage rate.
But you could come up with a different number in a reassessment than you would in a revaluation.
Correct.
Right?
I think you definitely would.
And you will come up with a different number. So that's why I'm asking about North Wildwood specifically. By jumping the line and doing their own reassessment, they could tell a homeowner, well, here's your reassessment, and by the way, in your particular case, you're getting a reduction. If the reevaluation is done, that could change dramatically.
I think,
Absolutely.
North Wildwood did one, probably about a reassessment, probably.
A reassessment.
Yeah, 5 to 8 years ago, because I have friends who had properties there, and, they all got letters, and they had increases, and they all needed to, if they wanted to appeal, they had to substantiate their appeal, so there was quite a bit.
The
back and
county would
forth.
have to come in and say that we don't believe that your reassessment is accurate, and you need to now go do a reevaluation.
Well,
They
what,
could.
what did we do the last time?
I would expect we did a reevaluation.
I can tell you, somebody came inside my house.
So that would be a revaluation.
Yeah.
I was reassessed.
at the time,
No,
I was reassessed
no,
after we
from
did the rehab on the home.
1949, that house.
So it's not the taxes for each individual taxpayer haven't gone up.
Oh.
Homes are reassessed all the time
Yeah.
in Cape May.
No, I know.
Okay.
I know that.
From the information that I was provided with, we're at least a year or two away from anything being done in Cape May.
And what would trigger that?
when 85,
Well, the
Who would
ci-
trigger that?
Well, on the reassessment, the city,
law.
Reevaluation. I'm sorry.
that would be the Cape May County tax assessor.
That's what I'm
She,
trying to-
she makes the determination, and then she notifies the local municipality.
Thank you.
You're required to do this, these 3 townships, boroughs, municipalities, you're on the list for 2026.
That does come from the county,
That, yes, yes.
and that's the
Well,
reevaluation.
yes, so they're getting, a report's being released by the New Jersey Division of Taxation on October 1, and then the county said they're going to mess around with it for a while, and then they'll let us know what they're doing.
But remember,
That's-
that the whole state is in the same situation, and there are 2 firms that do this.
No,
Now, there may be an opportunity that you can open a tax assessment.
Right, Ron? There you go, right?
Does anybody know how that affects your insurance? Even though you're not actually paying dollars anymore, how would that affect?
I don't think my
I don't think it
homeowner's
does.
tied to my
I'll
taxes.
tell you, Bob, because the insurance carrier comes in and does their own evaluation.
Yes.
Of what a
For
replacement value
replacement
is for the
cost,
house.
right.
Yeah.
They don't really look at that. They do their own.
Right.
Because you take a big risk if you go with an
School
assessment.
tax could
School
impact.
taxes are based on market value.
Yeah.
Well, on the previous conversation we had, the debt limit is based on the
Market value.
assessment.
Yep.
Well,
The market value.
oh, it is?
Yep.
All right, so the word said the
So
assessment.
the state and the county and the district, they're all telling us how much Cape May's properties are worth.
It
That
is.
doesn't factor into our tax base.
But, I mean, for those of us that have built homes in the last 10 years, we really would like to see this done sooner than later. Because and now the city's was very fair, I understand. And what they did was they looked at the market value of the home when it was done, and they notched it back 20%, I believe, which kind of, I think that's what they guessed the average was of the market number that we were behind. The data that you have here says, no, it's a lot.
Because it's really accelerated.
Lot bigger
It's in the
than that.
article. that-
More than 2 to 1.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, you can appeal it
Yep.
to the county.
You
So
can.
that was the other aspect from the research.
But no, it's not that whether I like it or not, it's the guy who's got the house that was built in 1949, like I did, that is way low.
Right. So the end
Their
result
tax rate is
that
way
about
low.
a third of the taxpayers will see an increase in their tax bill, a third will see a decrease in their tax bill, and a third will stay about the same. That's sort of how it all works out, assuming that you have a balanced budget going in.
Right.
So yes, it will be the long-term homeowner that hasn't improved their home in 40 years would potentially be in that one-third that would see an
Right.
increase.
Right.
You know, and so we'll see when it happens, but I wanted to make sure that we as MTRAC understood the difference between a revaluation and a reassessment. The city is pointing towards a revaluation, not a reassessment. From my research, the reassessments are more difficult to implement because they're so subjective. There's a lot more appeals that happen in a reassessment.
But still,
Yes.
we're going to wait until the Cape May County tax comes to us, is that right?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily? I saw Marie nod her head.
That was my understanding. I'm not sure what Paul shared with you.
So again, it could be decades before those two firms can get to Cape May.
Well, what,
You know, back when I was in office, Joe Fox was
Towards the mic.
crazy about all this tax stuff, and
Bob,
he found out,
Lean forward into the mic.
Joe found out that some of these big cities like Newark and Jersey City, they hadn't done anything for like, I don't know, I forget now, but it was like maybe 40 years, 50 years. It was crazy. And he was really at war with the county board, saying that we don't have to do it and stuff, but I'll just throwing that out.
In this particular issue, Maureen and I are not disagreeing. We don't know the answer, okay? It could be that we wait until the county tells us to. It could be that we decide to go forward.
so the reality is there's no impact to the overall tax situation. It is a
Right.
fairness
Right.
More
between
of a fairness
taxpayers
issue
more.
between homeowners.
Yeah.
It is, yes.
At the end of the day, if the county doesn't come to us, then what? It would be city council that makes that decision?
But here's the thing, there's a lot of
that
people,
right?
homeowners don't understand all this that we're going back and forth on. And you'll hear from them, believe me.
I agree. That's why I wanted to, on both of these last two topics, I felt as if it was important for MTRAC to have the vocabulary, to be able to talk intelligently about
Somebody
this.
really has to come and it's an educational process, even for some of us. We don't have all the answers.
Yeah, I almost feel like we need to figure out how to educate the real estate community, the realtors, because they are the folks that really, I mean, my wife is a realtor, she gets these questions all of the time, and I can only imagine that everybody else does
That's what I'm saying.
as well. So it's something to think about, some educational venue for that.
Well, we'll see what's in the newspaper next week.
Well, to a certain extent, though, it would be helpful. You could have reevaluation, external resources, you could have a list and then reassessment, internal, really, you could just have a couple bullet points. I mean,
Well,
So
we
if
could
you
always-
have a
oh,
reevaluation, can you appeal the same way that you can
Yes.
the reassessment?
Yes. It's,
The counties has a board.
because for reassessment, you appeal to the city. For reassessment, you appeal the city. Do you still appeal to the city with a reval, or do you appeal to the county?
I don't, there's a state appeal.
remembering that it would have been an outside firm that came up with the assessment. So whatever the appeal process is, it would go back to their data and say, would you please check your data on this property and tell us whether it was fairly assessed or not.
And the city would be hiring, even though it's only two companies, we would have our own agreement with those companies. So I would think your appeal would be to the city.
I would think so. I don't know for a fact, so I don't want to speak.
You're probably right, but there are people that we don't.
I know that with all the confusion around this whole process, like, I would think that everyone knows it's coming, so why not get in line now if there's only 2 firms that do it? Like, if they're like, sure, we'll see you in January, okay, maybe we can wait, but if they're not going to get here, like,
I think part of the challenge is not knowing what the determination of the county is, who they're going to prioritize. So going out and trying to engage with a firm that we might be number 12 on the list, you know, or something.
It's expensive,
And-
especially if
yeah,
it doesn't generate
right.
revenue.
Yeah.
Whatever the expense associated
Yep.
with that revaluation, that's sunk cost.
right, but, perhaps there's like a letter of intent kind of thing,
Yep.
like,
Well, we're already digitizing the map in anticipation of it.
Yes.
The city has already
Yeah.
taken that step. So we're getting ready for it. It's just a matter of when and how the switch gets thrown.
Martin, I think we ought to be able to squeeze $500,000 out of a little tiny mill change, whoops, we did a wrong calculation, we ended up with $500,000 extra dollars, okay. It's paid for.
Your address is what? Good discussion. Thank you for all participating. Okay, so that moves us to the next topic, which is what else is on everyone's minds? What are people thinking about? What have you been hearing that might be of interest to the group that we can expand on a little bit?
Well, so Maureen, I'm bringing this up only because I know you're all over it, but I do think that given a couple of the topics that came up with the audit that occurred, the ones that most of them didn't bother me, to be honest with you. I figured that's clerical error, somebody forgot to pay a premium. The ones that bothered me are the ones you've been part of this for quite some time. And I know Dennis always was concerned whenever we saw that there were expenditures that were over individual budget lines or et cetera.
Things not being reconciled.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so, and there were a couple of those that came out of this audit. So from an MTRAC perspective, at least from my perspective, those are the only ones I'm most concerned about.
Yeah.
And I guess what's the process, and is it possible perhaps in a future meeting to give us a bit of an update on?
Sure. So we have I'll call it a working document of every item that was detailed in the audit. I don't have it in front of me, Russ, so, let me just say it's, what I asked for when I met with Paul and Kevin was, what was the audit finding? What's the action plan? Who's responsible? Because this is not all CFO-related activities in some cases. And we targeted a completion date, okay? That has been updated with activities that are getting remediated and, worked on actively at this point in time. I have, the first meeting will probably be in the next couple of weeks because we put that document together maybe in the beginning of August. So giving them a couple weeks to kind of work on some, things that were easy, not easy fixes, but things were like, aha, why wasn't that done, those kinds of things. So I'll meet with them then, and those meetings will occur once a month. The completion date for the majority of these audit findings is between October 1st and December 31st. Some of them are year-end processing reconciliations. There are one or two that sort of bleed into the beginning of the year just by the nature of the finding. So I'm happy to come back to this group in October and give you an overview. We had 20, we're at, 50%, those kinds of things. Look, every year there's audit findings. When Mike was on council, he was involved with working with the CFO on this. In healthcare, the reason why you hire a firm sometimes is so that they can find things. Regardless of how good organizations run, this is not a defense, but, when I was, working in several capacities, we thought we had everything buttoned up, and you'd get an audit finding and be like, what? That has never been brought up before. Like, how did they find that? And those kinds of things. admittedly, there's some cleanup activity.
Yeah, no, I'm
and,
not, I'm
yeah.
not trying to make a.
Oh, no,
big
I
deal
know you're
of
not,
it,
no,
Ted.
this is more for the,
mean,
sort of the forward public speaking, yes, there are things that need to be, tightened up and reconciled, and those were the conversations, and they're being worked on. And, I took it upon myself to say, no, I want to sit down and be actively engaged with it and ask them to put together a document that I considered an executive summary and that could be looked at and completed. So
Perfect.
that's
yeah.
where we are.
No,
Yeah, that's what, when I was doing that, I would take a look at that report. I put together a document that Kevin and I both agreed on, said, here's the list of all the things that can be done and should be done, and then gave, not regular, they were several months apart, reports at council meetings. And
Yeah, that's,
But you know
I
what,
just
we never
felt it-
got to the end where everything was done.
Yeah, so I felt that, having known the work that Mike had done in the past, I felt that at this point in time, it just needed to be a little bit more involved on, from a council level.
no, that's perfect. I sort of equated, having been involved, as Michael knows, with kitchen inspections, I sort of look at it the same way. You always find stuff, but you put together your list and you follow through and look for the corrections. So, yeah, I just think it would be helpful for this committee to, on a couple of the items, not, most of them, but on a couple of the items, to have that. The only other one really was, that I had, Martin, was on recycling. We had talked about the fact that as we come to the end of the year, that we were going to have a look back, and I don't know if that's still on the plan.
Yeah, so actually, Paul just gave an update at the last council meeting, and it has been going very well. And I've talked to Eric a couple times. We have pretty much gotten conformity, and for, actually, somewhat on the residential side, where, even though none of those ordinance language changed, just getting people to understand sort of the recycling materials, how they should be boxed for putting things out, when they should be putting out lids on containers, et cetera. On the business side, they have been working with all of the businesses, and they feel very strongly that they've got everybody sort of, in line. If there's anyone that's looking for a private vendor, they're giving them the latitude to do that and working with them. We will have a report probably in November, but both Eric and Frank, Frank was going out every morning and checking in the beginning. So things have gone very well, and, from their perspective, things have improved vastly.
Yeah, part of it was obviously whether or not the guidelines should change because of, what took place, whether the cost should, in other words, looking at it from an holistic, I did listen to the council meeting.
Oh,
I heard
okay,
that.
all right.
So there was partially was that we were still going to do that sort of evaluation from that perspective.
In November was what he had
And
mentioned.
in November,
So
and that's still,
the same
that's
time.
still
Right.
set up to.
But again, it fits back into the cap discussion. Even if the city wanted to collect more recycling, they may not have the staff to be able to do it, and they can't hire more staff because they're bumping up against the cap.
And also capital to be able to purchase. And one thing that I think I've mentioned this previously here at this table, the number one risk management factor is workers' comp associated with employees in public works.
Yeah.
So that, even from the GIF's perspective, we'd have to be walking a very fine line. So, I think the fact that, they've gotten compliance and we're able to manage that within the current staffing model.
That's great.
It's, very good news. And thankfully that, all of the commercial businesses were able to conform. But, they worked with them. I will say that the communication from the leadership and Public Works as well as city administration on this has been very good.
That's great.
So Maureen, to your point about the risk associated with employees in that capacity, some logic had to have been put in place some number of years ago when the city decided to take over recycling from private contractors. And, today we have a situation where the city workers obviously collect recycling, and Gold Medal and Dave's Trash and Pineland and Waste Management all drive their trucks around the same routes collecting trash. it's not logical to me, but perhaps there's some logic I'm not understanding as to why we have those two different models in place and how we wound up there, and whether whether that should be the
So
solution for the future.
recycling was taken over by the city because they had a contract with the vendor who was increasing the prices. The second piece of it was, at that point in time, recycling had a revenue stream. And that changed in about 2017, and the city had assumed the responsibility because there was some revenue for it. That changed. And so it's no longer, any kind of a revenue source, it's a cost expense. And so the balance now is we can manage a certain portion of it, and it's been, we've reconciled to providing that service for residents. The accommodation on the commercial was, we looked at a couple other municipalities that have a similar model and adopted their ordinance language, quite frankly, to say we can accommodate up to a certain amount. Beyond that, it becomes it would require additional resources from a personnel standpoint and additional resources from equipment standpoint, so.
Yeah, no, I understand the
I'm sorry.
recycling piece. What I'm trying to understand is why, I mean, if I were looking at this from a strictly business perspective, then I would say that one of those models presumably is better than the other. Either a single, municipal paying model because it's so efficient and the city, contract labor rates are so much better, therefore we should do recycling and trash with that model, or no, that's
Well,
not the best
yeah,
model, and therefore we should be outsourcing everything.
I don't think that the city, at least as a council member, I'm certainly not interested in getting into the trash business to add that on. I think that the baseline accommodation that we have right now for residents to enter into a discussion to say we're taking that away, would upset people at this point, which is why we introduced some component to support the commercial businesses, the commercial entities in a limited fashion. So, in my mind, to go further into the business, recycling, at least we have the ability to take that up to Burley for the drop-off for that, and it's the material is sourced to the different types. Trash is a whole different thing.
I'll tell you, that discussion just gives me I get a little bit ill in my stomach when we talk about, us taking over trash again.
Yeah, to be clear, I'm not
I
suggesting it
understand
that
you-
way. I was kind of
you were not
suggesting the other way,
condoning
but I
that.
was trying to use the illustration.
I think from an MTRAC's perspective that we ought to be examining how we get out of the recycling
That was
business.
where I was going. I just,
And one of the
And
things-
there's a number of ways to do it, but to be honest with you, I mean, I know the residents of the city would be upset if they had to take care of it. I'm not suggesting that they necessarily do. I'm suggesting that I'll bet you can get a private contractor to do it for less cost than what we are, and less risk than what we're doing.
So I would say North Wildwood, their experience with that was Gold Medal came back in the middle of a contract and basically said, we're raising the fees.
Yeah.
In the middle of the contract, and if you don't pay us, we're basically going to just increase, we'll stop. Ocean City had the same experience with another vendor. One of the things, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but I certainly do, the vendor that I use for trash just continues to add on expenses, whether it be for personnel or gas, and just sends it in the bill. It's not even a discussion. I don't have the ability to, and I've shopped around,
right.
and it pretty much is on par with what is being offered for the three other vendors coming in. So I am a little sensitive about talking about something that is personnel-driven.
Okay.
So, just in all fairness, you don't, I mean, I'm not disputing the fact that something should be looked at, but please recognize that this is people and their livelihoods.
So when
Yeah, yeah.
MTRAC looks at an issue, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're suggesting that something change. It's that we want to be able to make decisions from a position of knowledge. Okay?
Yeah.
It is on the list of projects that we are going to be looking at longer term. We should, and Dennis was a proponent of this as well. MTRAC should be involved in reviewing what the different alternatives are. In my town in Massachusetts, there is no city collection. You bring your trash and your recycling to the central recycling area.
That's why,
Or-
that's why you're moving to Cape May, right?
Or, that's right. No, or you hire someone to come pick up, and I get both my trash and recycling picked up at the same time in the same truck, and they have not raised the rates in any way over the course of time. So I don't know what drives the difference between Massachusetts and New Jersey, but those are factors. that we
Probably
can
the
talk about.
vendor.
Yep. I've had changes in vendor, but it's, Waste Management just here in town just increased the rate by 20% for private collection.
Well,
I also learned, just one more point. I also learned that Cape Resorts has a compactor for the recycling. That makes an
Yes,
awful
we
lot of
do.
sense.
Do you know how much it costs?
I don't know how much it costs.
$30,000 a year.
Is that a lot or a little?
I don't think,
I think it's a lot. It's only for Congress Hall. So
Yep.
we have it's $30,000 for a trash compactor plus $30,000 for a recycling compactor. It's only Congress Hall, and each property has their own agreement.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't think 30,000 is a lot.
So I think that those are the kinds of things that allowing for individual businesses to make a different decision. Compacting would seem to make a lot of sense, but it is a cost-benefit analysis for sure.
But the point you're making is that it's on the list.
It is on the list.
So we're looking at it.
Yeah.
Is on the list, because I know it came up in city council, and there was an article on the 900 rental license folks.
There will be a correction made by the city manager at the next council meeting.
It isn't 900?
Pardon me?
It is not 900?
It is not 900.
But it's a lot. Whatever the number is, it's,
Can I just, I
Well,
want
no,
to.
well, then make comment, because it's a
I'll make
public
a
article
comment.
that's out there.
I know, I understand that, and a correction will be posted. There, the new software, Rentalscape, and how SDL is set up are two different kind of programs, right? And different fields. I don't want to go too far into this is good, but on the very high level. So they're going through a line-by-line reconciliation. The number is not 900. Paul will make a correction statement. It was overstated at the council meeting. He will also be asking, I think, the Herald to make a correction to the number. They're actually meeting the next couple of days with the clerk's office to go through that number. And so I asked him this afternoon, I think the number's going to come in somewhere, please don't quote me, but it might be somewhere between 50 and 80. But please allow them to go through the due process.
What is the,
Well, you go ahead, Maureen.
Yeah, there was an article, at the last council meeting, Paul had asked Aaron where where things were with the reconciliation between SDL and Rentalscape, the software system that we look at, that we contract it with, to understand what's being marketed in Cape May for transient, and whether or not they have a mercantile license.
so that the quote was 900 people are renting, but they're not licensed?
Yes.
Okay.
And so there will be a correction to that. One of the challenges was in SDL, the second line for an apartment or, something else is delineated separate. In SDL, in Rentalscape, I think I have this right, it was just all one thread. The same with some of the properties in Village Green, the quads. So it's 1310A or 1310B. Well, some of that is we have, but Rentalscape doesn't have it lined up the same way. So, an update will be provided at the next council meeting, and that.
And then whatever the fallout is, whether it's 50, 75.
Yeah.
There'll still be a follow-up.
Yes.
With those
Co-
folks,
yes,
right?
that was the point of my, that they're meeting. They'll be meeting with code enforcement to talk about next steps on those properties, once they feel confident that they have the solid verification, so.
Sheriff said.
Yeah.
but that was an MTRAC initiative that the city adopted, and Sarah helped to underscore how important it was. So just MTRAC in action. Any other topics?
Maybe a question is, again, in business, when we are trying to do budgeting for large organizations, we have this use it or lose it concept that sometimes burned us because we'd find people wanting to make sure they got at least as much as they got the previous year, and so they would just spend.
Always happens in government.
That's been my observation, is it happens in government. So my real question is, how frequently have we compared our cost for various aspects of the budget with, either a per capita basis or some other basis to say, how good do we feel about expenses A through F on some basis of comparison, as opposed to just they're growing by 4% a year and therefore it must be fine because it's only whatever percent it was over the previous year.
So I would, the one area, there's actually, I think, two. So as I stated earlier, the majority of the expenses for the city budget, the majority, are personnel. And I would say that probably represents maybe upwards of 80% of our budgets. And how personnel expenses, salaries are evaluated, or how they're given, is based on market. So I've been much more driving towards the discussion about what's the market analysis, what are we seeing in other areas for certain types of positions. As I mentioned also, we just went through, I think, probably 6 contracts. And all of those, Ron, were based on what's happening in other local markets for recruitment and retention. The Labor Council we have is someone who works with all of the other municipalities, so is very familiar with terms. And then on the
And even on that, then on the personnel, and I realize the sensitivity of this conversation, but I just, out of curiosity again, do we understand the levels of deployment of people that we have in certain areas per capita or per geography or whatever is the denominator versus other municipalities?
And I don't know how, the per capita comes into that's just.
Yeah.
I don't know how the per capita comes into it. The other thing is that in some municipalities, other municipalities, you might have a department that is public works and tourism together. Like they don't, not everybody lines up exactly. We take it based on the work, the type, the position, laborer versus seasonal versus, a class 2 versus a sergeant, those types of things. We look at those, what we're seeing in the market with regard to pay, and then try and be competitive. One of the things, Cape May has been behind in this, and we were losing employees because our pay was not competitive. Also, it's expensive to live here because you can't find housing and all of the other things. So there was a very significant undertaking to make sure that we were, paying a livable, wage, and also being competitive, so we weren't losing somebody to Wildwood, who had been with the city for, 15 years, and now it was going to cost us more to recruit, or wouldn't even be able to recruit for somebody with that level of knowledge and skill. And the other piece, something that we did last year and I was involved in, was the healthcare benefits. We got out of the state, and we are we are sort of through a broker, but pretty much it's the cities paying directly to, the health insurance company. And so I'm involved with that directly. And we're going through that exercise again to take a look at what the cost will be for the renewal and if that's in the best interest of the city. So, I have, pretty involved in those discussions and those meetings. And then the other piece of it really comes down to, as I mentioned, pension. There are pension contributions that can be pretty hefty for some of the contracts, which just follows salary and level of position. And the other is the operating expenses, but for the most part, that represents a very small number, compared to. It's for, laborers in DPW, it's work boots and shirts and that kind of
So
thing.
it's a fair question.
Yeah.
But I would think it would be very difficult to find a comparable town that grows from 2,700 to 60,000 people that are staying in the town, And Zach mentioned 100,000 people that are using the beaches. I mean, that was, when he mentioned that number, that was an incredible number to me, that it is that high. So I think what Maureen is suggesting
Long way
is
of
we
saying.
we scrub the budget pretty darn good. And we look for opportunities to save because, again, going back to the cap, it's a very necessary exercise when your labor costs are going up by more than 3.5%, labor and benefit costs. You've got to always find opportunities to save elsewhere to be able to continue to afford to pay your employees.
One of the ways that you were looking for was under the shared services, for instance, agreements.
Right. So those recommendations are still being implemented. The police contract is up this year, and the city's working on that. I also, from the budget cap conversation, I did ask, I had noticed in my research that, again, going back to the recycling topic, trash and recycling may be something that can be pulled out, but that we're not pulling out. So there's maybe an opportunity there. But also the state sends a letter every year saying this can be and this can't be. So the city's going to explore that a little bit. So yeah, it's a good conversation to have constantly. And MTRAC has a seat at that table, which is, I think, what makes MTRAC pretty valuable.
Thank you.
Okay. The last topic that I wanted to just mention is that there's some things going on, conversations that are happening in public and not, about starting to think about the future of Cape May. What does Cape May 2030 or 2035 look like? How do we have parking? How do we have workforce housing? How do we, how can we help Cape May to continue to be attractive? The planning board especially, if you haven't been following those meetings, have been pretty interesting lately. They have formed a parking subcommittee that Dennis is on, along with Gary Paducis and Justin Riggs, and they're going to come back to the planning board with a concrete proposal about how to address the parking issues. There was conversation when there's a great dialogue between Zach and Curtis Bashaw at the TPA meeting, where Curtis was talking about what he wants to do for his properties to keep them viable long-term, and wanting to work with the city in partnership to help to see some of those things happening. Maureen has been putting a lot of energy into the topic of workforce housing at the planning board level. It may have started with an individual application, but City Council is working on new ordinance that basically provides some incentive to provide workforce housing, especially on the mall. And we recognize that it's critically important for Cape May to be able to provide for the people that either benefit Cape May or benefit Cape May's residents by being nurses and doctors and teachers with a place to live to the greatest extent possible. It's exciting to hear those kinds of conversations are happening. And again, I think that MTRAC will play a role in that going forward, and we'll stay abreast of it.
So on the parking committee, is that then one that, once again, we would be asked to potentially look for sources of?
It's on the list.
Okay.
We would be the group that would be asked, how do we fund that?
How do we fund it?
Okay?
Yeah,
And I really just, on our topics list, I did carry forward, not suggesting that's how we're going to go, but just carried forward from Dennis's list, the possibility of a fourth-class city tax.
Well, I was pleased to hear from the mayor at the Cottagers annual meeting that many of those parking spaces, when the police station is done, will still be available, which was good news, because let's face it, a lot of people are taking advantage of that piece of property right now.
Workers in the city.
But the Lafayette Street lot won't be. once
Yeah,
the
no,
park
no,
is
he
done.
said the parking spaces will still be a number of them there, I think 75.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but don't say that in front of the DEP. Yeah, the DEP said no way.
Yeah.
Strike it from the record.
All of the, yeah, strike, that was, yeah.
Well, they're not going to be on the ground. I don't know. Anyway,
No, that's certainly the way things are going to go, but I'm just saying that the DEP says 100% of those parking spaces are for that park.
For the park.
And we know better. We know better. But
To walk through the park to get anywhere else.
It's evolving, and again, I'm
We were at the
just, I'm
park and the
excited,
city. How's that work out?
I'm excited to hear about the fact that there are good minds that are thinking about what the future of Cape May is. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
Make the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all so much.
Yep, thanks.
Aye, 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 aye.